My name is Natalie Bubenheim, and I chose to do my analysis on Ralph Ellison and the idea of racism in his literature. Ralph Ellison did not write stories in order to protest racism or to express his anger on the topic, but rather to express what racism was like for African Americans and to make others aware of how terribly they were treated. An article written by Sheldon Goldfarb included a quote by Ralph Ellison saying, "Despite oppression, African Americans are not mere victims and should not restrict to protest literature full of anger." This view was shown in Ellison's literature, specifically A Party Down at the Square and Battle Royal, the two I will be focusing on. A Party Down at the Square was published in 1997, 3 years after Ellison's death, so it's obviously not a way to protest racism, or else he would have gotten it published while he was still alive and while racism was still a huge issue. One goal of A Party Down at the Square was to show how corrupt the United States was, and one way Ellison accomplished this was through his language and point of view in the story. The story was written from the perspective of a young boy from Cincinnati who referred to African Americans only by using the N-word, which he used excessively, showing how the idea of racism and that African Americans are inferior was even instilled and showed in children from the North. Jed Wilson represented the racists in the town and tells the man burning, "Ain't no Christians around tonight, just 100% Americans," truly showing how corrupt the towns in the South were, since what they were doing was clearly against America's standards, which is equality for everyone, but they still called themselves 100% Americans. Ellison's use of a young boy as a narrator, referring to African Americans only by the N-word, explicitly describing the man on fire, and Jed referring to the lynchings as 100% American, shocks the reader and emphasizes how common the lynchings were and how they were seen as no big deal, since children were able to watch them and they were even referred to as parties, further showing how backwards America was. In addition, the man who was being lynched was not given a name, showing how African Americans were dehumanized by the white men and stripped of their identity. African Americans were used as objects for the enjoyment of white people. The townspeople in A Party Down at the Square thought nothing of burning the black man and even saw it as entertainment. This was also shown in A Battle Royal when the African American teens were made to fight against each other in a ring for the enjoyment of wealthy white men. The men treated the boys as animals, yelling, "Get going, black boy," and "Mix it up," when white Americans made African Americans feel helpless and that they had no choice but to act the way they wanted them to, which was shown when the narrator of A Battle Royal says, "There was nothing to do but what we were told." It is also shown in how the narrator of A Battle Royal is only able to give his speech and receive a scholarship to university by doing what the men said and participating in the fight. Being able to attend university was a huge deal for African Americans at that time, since the opportunity was not easily attainable for them. An article written by Alphonse Hennenberg stated that white Americans were skeptical and doubtful of these schools and wondered if Negroes even had the requisite brain capacity for them. While creating schools for African Americans was a step in the right direction, it was still keeping racism alive by segregating the African Americans and forcing them to attend a completely different school from the whites. In the same article by Alphonse Hennenberg, he describes African American schools, saying how they were strategically placed between Virginia and Texas, keeping the African Americans in the South, further segregating them, and that the education in the South was very poor, in the fact that many of their school teachers could barely write their name and who were weak mentally and morally. The conditions of the Southern education were improved, however, with the establishment of Tuskegee Institute. Booker T. Washington was the head of Tuskegee Institute in Alabama and was someone Ellison clearly looked up to and supported, since he made his narrator in A Battle Royal view himself as a Booker T. Washington of sorts. Washington stated that Tuskegee Institute exhibited a great influence on the education in the South, taught Negroes the importance of training the hand as well as the head, and taught them the dignity of labor. Washington's view of education caused him to be both praised and criticized. In an article by Theodore Lewis, he agrees with Washington's point of view that the idea of vocational studies should be the basis of education in black progress, and that it is important for blacks to learn the dignity of labor and that it does not make them a slave again to perform said labor. I disagree with this point of view. Having vocational studies as the basis of education for black progress further supports the racist view that African Americans are better fitted for the learning of trades rather than other more scholarly professions. It gives the idea that African Americans should remain in their place as laborers and not aspire to climb the ladder with a liberal education. This idea of telling African Americans to stay in their place was shown in a battle royal when the narrator accidentally says social equality instead of social responsibility, and a man tells him, "We mean to do right by you, but you must know your place at all times." The fact that Ellison includes this in his story, even though he, to a point, agrees with Washington's view, further shows that his literature was not meant to protest slavery or show his stance on the topic, but rather to give a glimpse of what slavery was like for African Americans in a less biased and more factual way. Ellison, like many other authors, was often criticized on his literature and the topics he chose to write about, but I think he did a great job at capturing the essence of slavery and what America was like in the mid-20th century, so that readers like us have a better understanding of the time period and the poor conditions of the United States. Thank you.